So thanks. Today we have Lee Wagner, who's a yoga instructor, a Marine veteran. We're going to talk a little bit today about yoga, about PTSD, but really, as in this series with help with the invisible injury, we're looking at ways veterans around the globe really are dealing with these invisible injuries, more than just PTSD, anxiety, depression. And these things stem from more than just combat duty. And we want to talk about that, the various aspects of that. But yoga is one. It's very interesting. And my friend Lee here is really, in the brief conversations Lee, we've had about it, you've taught me a lot. But before I get ahead there, let me let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your military background, what you do today, and how you got into yoga.
Sure. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate being on, and you and I have been working together for a few years now. So I'm really excited for you and OVN and all the programming you bring to the veterans community. So
Thanks.
Glad to be on here. One correction I will make: I'm not officially a yoga instructor yet. I still got a couple more weeks left. So and I'll talk a little bit about what that means. And
right.
But that's the I'm completing my Yoga Alliance 200-hour training.
Okay.
An actual certification. So that'll be done mid-May. So anyway, Western Pennsylvania guy, dropped out of college at 20, joined the Marine Corps. My brother had served 6 years in the Marine Corps and served in Persian Gulf. And so in 1995, when college wasn't doing so well, I just, that was always an option. My brother was 7 years older, and I always looked up to him and his service. So when I kind of hit a stuck point here in Freeport, Pittsburgh area, I signed up and shipped out and Paris Island, and then I spent most of it out at Camp Pendleton. Nothing exciting, no deployments. It was the late 90s. Came back here in 99, and there's a reserve unit, truck company reserve unit in Ebensburg out near Altoona. And I signed on with them. And then, at that point, back to school, back to work, the kind of normal veteran transition life. And then September 11th happened. And, obviously, it's pretty cliche to say, but, everyone was kind of like, what are we going to do? What happened?
Yeah, right.
And I was towards my tail end of my 8 years. So they kept asking me to re-enlist. And I was like, let's see what happens here. And, and lo and behold, January of 2003, we got activated. And then February 15th, 2003, we landed at Camp Matilda in Kuwait, attached to 1st Marine Division. We were a truck company, so we were assigned 7 tons and eventually, attached to the 1st MARDIV for the push into Iraq in March of 2003. So I was there until September of 2003, March to September. Came home, and by that point, I was past my 8 years. I had 4 active, 4 reserve. Mm-hmm. And I got back. I went from Kuwait, basically Iraq, Kuwait, home, out of the Marine Corps within 3 weeks. Yeah. No TAPS program, no, I was already off active duty, no transition, 96er, came back, turned my gear in, done, out of the Marine Corps completely, 4 days home from the Middle East. And, it's what I wanted. It's what, at that time, I was very, over the military, very done with it, and happy to go, but proud of my service, but just ready to move on. And I would say struggle. I didn't really know I was really struggling till later on, but drank really heavily for couple years, but eventually I met my first wife, and then we had a life, whole 9 yards. Got into financial services. I was a financial advisor for a decade. And then in 2012, I started getting into, different like 5Ks and 10Ks and ruck marches and different things like that, just dipping my toe back into the veterans community about 10 years after I was out.
Right.
That's, about the same time, 2007, I should say, is when, to answer your question about yoga, how I got into it was I came into yoga more from the meditation path. So, and I'll talk a little about this, why yoga in a, later on, but, I came into yoga from the mindfulness meditation path because I found Buddhism. And, coming out of the military and, combat exposure, I had a lot of questions and, didn't think anything was wrong with me. I just thought this is how you process things. And I still don't think anything's wrong, but that's kind of how I got into that. But 2015 was a big year. That's when I left the corporate world. I was a vice president, sales manager at PNC Investments. I had a team of advisors, financial advisors, and left that to work at Duquesne University. They had a bachelor's, or veterans, the bachelor's of nursing. So I transitioned and started working with veterans, full time. And then Duquesne has a military psychology clinic. So I started going there. I was like, let's check this out.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to seeing a therapist, one of their doctoral students, off and on for a couple of years. And it was life-changing. So that's where I did my rounds of therapy, or a couple of times off and on for a few years. And then eventually made my way to the vet center. Really got into yoga probably within the past half a dozen years, 5-6 years, using it more of, I run, I was doing, functional fitness, that type of stuff. It was more of how can I accentuate those physical activities. And there was there's a ton of like different programs for veterans doing yoga. But I was just using it more of like kind of a workout mentality. And it really was right at the end of 2019, right before COVID, where I was like, I wanted to be more serious about becoming an instructor, and how that all happened last year. I didn't do it, but I kind of pumped the brakes on it, but I am completing it with a studio here in Murraysville where we live. So that's about it. And so now I'm engaged, first marriage.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Engaged, Ariana, she's an Army veteran. We met through work. She has 3 kids. We all live here in Murraysville. We have one on the way, and life has never been better. Period.
That's cool. That's cool. I mean, and you're about the experience, with a new kid. I just had a grandkid, so
congratulations.
it's like having a kid all over again to me, except we get to send her home. So, but what, Lee, thanks for that. Thanks for your service too. I didn't mention that, but one point that I wanted to point out, and I think I've heard this more from veterans than I really thought. When I deployed, I came back out. I actually finished my service in recruiting. So the last few years were pretty much, in my mind, I was out of the military, but I was wearing a uniform. It was just recruiting duty, leadership type things, and really, really rewarding part of my military career. But anyways, back to what you said, talking to a veteran that deployed, did 6 years, was a special tactics guy, and he went to Afghanistan. I think he was there about 6 months, and same thing. Came home, got discharged. Everything honorably, just was at the end of his enlistment, and out the door. And he had TAP. But I get this thing all the time. It's like everybody says, man, it's like the fire hose drill. They're just pounding you with information, and it's almost like it's quantitative, not qualitative. You know what I mean? If we give them every piece of information, which is a good thing, but I think so much can be said with that. They need to start that process a year before they get out. You know what I mean? And if you're seriously thinking about it, that process needs to. And I think a lot of things are changing in the military, but I think that's an excellent point for other families, veterans that listen to our podcast need to realize there still is no real solid preparation to leave the military, like there is to get in the military. That they got that down to a science, how they're going to get us and mold us where we want to be. And they do an excellent job at it. It's just that, the human being factor kicks in later there. And to talk about some of that today is how we deal with such a rigorous, challenging training. And then when, they light the fuse, and it's like, okay, now apply this training in a real world situation. Now you have to duck when a bullet comes. You know what I mean? It's nobody's telling
Right.
you move this way, this way. You've got to start to, act on instinct. And that's where I wanted to talk a little bit about, and not just the combat situation, just the stress of the duty itself. It was interesting. I was listening to, wasn't a podcast, but like a presentation from Dr. Dan Libby, who I think it's the Veterans Yoga Project. He started several years ago. And it's interesting. He talks about PTSD, but he talks about so many things that are factors in a veteran's life that are unrelated to combat that cause trauma, even years later. He even went back into childhood abuse, to traumatic experiences, like what I think of in the military. A lot of guys and girls are around training accidents. They don't realize our daily training is very dangerous. And they can see some horrific things, close calls, almost losing, a teammate, things like that. So let's talk a little bit about PTSD. You've got more background on this by your, obviously, like, your VA experience working with the VA, as a veteran yourself. I always like to kind of set the stage. We're going to talk about yoga, but looking at PTSD itself, a couple of things I noticed. What would you say the predominant, let's call them symptoms, or amongst veterans you see that are very common, not only common, but typically unrecognized? You made a comment earlier on, there's nothing wrong with me. I say there's nothing wrong with me. My wife says that's a matter of opinion. So, it's, but, and I'll give you one example. So my buddy Dean was on, who we talked about use music. He had traumatic brain injury. He was knocked unconscious briefly and all that. And he kept deploying. They got him back. Hey, you're okay. Deployed again. It was his wife that said she was reading a brochure at the doctor's on traumatic brain injuries. She looked at him and said, "Look, man, this is you." Right. He said, "This is not me." And she said, "Oh yeah, short-tempered, short fused, things of that nature." In the family, his wife identified. So back to you, what are the things you're commonly seeing family members should watch for, veterans maybe we don't recognize with ourselves?
Yeah, no. So I guess what part I left out of my introduction is I've been with the VA Vet Center program for over 3.5 years, and I do outreach for combat veterans and then service members who have experienced military sexual trauma. And I'm in graduate school for community psychology, so I do a lot of research around MST and moral injury. And this is kind of a daily, it's nothing uncommon for me to be sitting around at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning talking about trauma or yoga or anything. It's very very part of my everyday. It's interesting. To answer your point of like what can family members see. I definitely agree with that 100%. Like your family see it first, and I hear this a lot from mothers, and I heard it from my own mother twice, once for me and once for my brother from coming back. Like that's the Lee that came home is not the Lee who left. And I was already in the Marines for 6-7 years by that point. So there's the everyday world of military. And when I worked at Duquesne, I came up with this phrase, working with faculty, helping faculty and staff better understand the mindset of a military member transitioning to higher education. And I used the term, military is a violent industry. Yeah, it is. I mean, that's a good definition. I saw the light bulb go off in a lot of, career professors, career educators, because it really is. Whether it's day one of boot camp, it's an indoctrination, as you mentioned, Tony. It's preparing for this ultimate way of life. Yeah. And then, it's really hard to dial that back. But anyway, so that's, that's exactly, it's a violent industry, whether or not you're live firing, there's things going off. They're training you how to kind of stifle your reaction, your natural reaction, the way our bodies are designed to survive. Training at times is training you or teaching you how to stifle that. So that can be that everyday trauma that he mentions, because that's just going against your human nature, of how to survive. So, and that's on purpose because they want you to survive. So yeah, what I see a lot of, and what I saw myself, and I just wrote a couple of things down here. I'll get to in a sec, but to your point about like, she read that pamphlet or whatever and said, you have all these things. I was at a nursing conference and there was one of the psychologists at the VA was giving a presentation, and up on the PowerPoint, he had, symptoms of PTSD. And I looked at my coworker and I was like, I've had all those. And there were like 30 of them at some point. That was like 2015.
Right.
And I said, at some point over the past 12, 13 years, I've had all of these. And he was and still is, he was a nurse practitioner, mental health nurse practitioner. And he looked at me like, well, you should talk about this. And that's eventually encouraged me to go. But I mean, it's for me, a couple of things I wrote down here. It's hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is big, period, in the military. It's that scanning the room. It's the sitting in the corner. It's that always being on, always being ready to protect yourself and others. And really, if you look at a brain scan, you can see hypervigilance. You can see the brain working. And that's where meditation and mindfulness training comes in to kind of help bring that hyped up brain down. Another one for me, I never had bad dreams. I had a few when I first came home, but I never had really flashbacks. I had daydreams, and it was something I didn't realize was a thing. So they were kind of visions I would have throughout the day of, things I saw, or, some of the more traumatic episodes. And that was a daily occurrence. Walking from the bus to the office, coming home, working out, whatever it was, they were always there, and they had a sting to them. So I didn't realize it was a thing, because at that point, I'd always heard, well, I don't have nightmares, I don't have flashbacks. The drinking was big. Drinking. I was just talking about this with Ariana last night. We were having she's pregnant. I was having a beer with dinner.
She's cut off.
She's drinking changed for me in 2003 when I came home. I could drink twice as much as before, and I was in the Marine Corps for 7 years. I mean, I could drink, like any, I'm being very cliche, but it was a type of drinking where it was like I could go past drunk and just keep drinking. I was luckily I never got a DUI. Luckily I never got arrested for anything. But it was just a way to numb anger, short temper. I think those are the very, very common ones that we see coming walking in the door. What I hear for veterans when they approach me is they'll just be like, I don't feel right. Something is off. I can't control my emotions. I'm crying at the drop of a hat, or I'm throwing a punch at the drop of a hat. And what that really is that that's the brain. So, I'm not a doctor. Neither one of us are psychologists, but essentially what happens when your brain is experienced trauma, it goes into this protective phase. So it takes that experience and it pushes it down, so to speak, so that you survive and can move on. And what happens is that the body still needs to process, and that's where the flashbacks and the daydreams and the nightmares. And then that underlying energy burst is because the brain is always working. And when you factor in and utilize more mindfulness practices, you give the brain and the body space to process that trauma. There's some number of books. If I find it sitting in front of me, I'll hold it up. Or it's called How the Body Keeps the Score. And it talks about how the body itself physiologically and psychologically processes trauma. So it's a real thing for the body to hold it in. It's a real thing for the brain to never shut off. And if we see these all the time, like multiple deployments, it's easier to just suck it up, put the uniform, and go back into it, because that becomes more, that life is more automatic than life back here. So
a couple really interesting points that I want to draw out. Like you said, we're not psychologists, we're not therapists in that nature. But one of the things that I really I want to bring out in this podcast is often we'll have, PhDs or so on come on, but I think it's important for other veterans and families to hear really how people that have experienced this and lived through this, how we look for ways and how we've gotten better. You know what I mean? What have we done to get better? And obviously we use those resources, and that's what OVN's about. We want to connect our veterans to those resources, but the hypervigilance thing is a big thing. Many veterans they think that's just normal after being in the military for so many years. I think about, I laugh at, some of the guys on our board were in 30 years, retired E9s. It's funny. I pick up the phone and I can't stop calling him Chief. Well, it's just ingrained in my brain. That's not Mike. It's Chief. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's kind of disrespectful if I call this guy Mike. And it's funny, but it's just something as simple as that. That's the daily way we live. The other thing you mentioned is, the business of that we're in. The military is designed to fight to the death to keep what we have in this country. And to the lowest level, the lowest ranking individual with the most trivial job, it seems like, plays a part in that big machine that keeps these things going. And I've seen airmen, soldiers, Marines, Navy, low ranking, that are doing things that actually get under stress because they can't manage that when they get a view of the bigger mission and what piece they play in it. And people don't catch that. And I think that's where every veteran out there, no matter what you did, there's going to be times when you have those daydreams, these things, and they're not something to just say, whatever, I just remembered something. This is something. Talk to different veterans, talk to your buddies that are veterans. I think that's a huge opportunity to network there. It's a non-threatening environment. Hey, how you doing? Right. I've talked to, that's where I go to guys and girls that I've been stationed with and say, hey, how you doing? What have you been up to? I don't call up and say, hey, you feeling bad? You have nightmares? It's like, that type of thing. But so I think that's important. Yeah. Another thing that you touched on, and I was doing a little bit of reading about this, is a lot of veterans get themselves in a bad situation post-military service because they don't know how to deal with it. Yeah. Like you said, drinking. I didn't realize this. I read a stat the other day. There's like almost 700,000 veterans that are in jail or prison or some sorts, or in the court system. And Veterans Court is something we see growing across the United States, which is a really good program. But they're looking at the aspects more of what's causing the veteran, somebody that was trained in this manner, to go off left or right, whatever. I think back to PTSD and the hypervigilance and the inability to deal with things that you don't understand cause veterans to seek other avenues to numb. When we know that, we know addiction. It's horrible. I mean, that's probably the most devastating, that we lose so many, which takes us to really the ultimate factor why we do this. We have too many veterans commit suicide. And that's with OVN, with the vets. We work with the vet center. I know this is not a vet center podcast, but I can't say enough good thing about the vet center folks that I work with, but the idea that we still see those numbers on that consistent level up around 20 or whatever it is, tells me somebody's got to shift gears here. We have to look at this differently. And that's why, without getting too long-winded about that, is really going back to things like music therapy, like jujitsu. These are things you can just go down the street, find a place, and we're here to help you with that. And I'll tell you, folks, go to your VAs, your vet center, use those resources. But those are things that you can do that are not like, okay, I'm going to see my psychologist today, I'm in therapy. Those have a place and they are something you need to look into, but there's things we can do on a daily basis. And I want to talk about yoga specifically now and how that's helped you personally, and how you've seen it had an effect on veterans that you've been, you've introduced it to. So tell us a little bit about your personal experience with yoga. I know you talked a little bit how you found it, but
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, you're exactly right. And well, to answer your question, I'd always done it just to try to kind of accentuate the physical fitness, and that's part of that hypervigilance. I mean, I came back, and I mean, I was never a big runner. I'm not like, I mean, I'm a 200-pound guy. I'm not going to go out and run ultra marathons, but I mean, hikes, rucks, CrossFit,
Yeah.
I mean, everything just to push, because that felt normal, to push and push and push and push and work and push. And that's,
Yeah.
and that's another thing too, that back to the list of what, overachieving.
Yeah.
A lot of veterans, and we see this a lot in the military sexual trauma community. It's overabundance of something, overabundance of achieving, overabundance of addiction, because that's a different type of trauma that kind of transcends many things. And so yeah, this is something that popped up in my head. So for me, recently in the last 2 years, I'll say, very much got into meditation more. So I was introduced to meditation through Buddhism and practicing Buddhism and learning about it. Pittsburgh Buddhist Center up in the Trona Heights. They just moved, I think. Then there's the Zen Center in the North Hills. So that's where I would go and learn about Buddhism more and spirituality, and then practice sitting meditation. And then I've also completed mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's like a couple-week workshop for meditation, specifically different types of meditation. So when you talk about yoga, you're actually talking about meditation. So yoga goes back, it goes back thousands of years to essentially yogis sitting in caves, sitting and breathing and meditating, and or laying down and meditating, or walking and meditating.
Yeah.
What we know as yoga today, with your Bikrams and your vinyasa flows and your yoga flows and these other things, are within the last 100 to 125 years. So the poses and the different things you see, yes, they all have a history, but the more the popularity of yoga is really just in the last 150 years. So
yeah, right.
And that's an important note, because lots of people do yoga for the workout. It's a great workout. Yoga is a spiritual connection. So the word yoga in Sanskrit, which is where the beginnings of yoga come from, Sanskrit, different parts of India, means to connect. It's a yoke. Yoga, the word means in Sanskrit, means yoke. It's a connecting, and what you're connecting is your singular universe to the universal, or excuse me, your singular consciousness to the universal consciousness. So what you're doing is, through the process of doing the practice, you're connecting your mindfulness to the mindfulness of the world. And this is where some people are like, oh, right, time out. This is all, So, and that's probably why you see, not probably, that's why you see a lot of like the more workout-ish types of yoga, because it's great for the body. I mean, it's moving the body, it's structure, it's a great part. That's what it's there about. So, for me, coming into yoga, it's more of a three. It's the physical, it's the mental, and it's the spiritual connection. So when you become a yoga instructor through whatever school, Ashtanga, Iyengar, just a regular vinyasa flow, which is your more traditional flowing class, you're, as the instructor, you're sharing your practice. So you're not just getting up there and doing the movements and saying, all right, see you next week. It's meant to be, I'll put it this way, it's meant to be a sharing of one's practice. So when I really kind of started internalizing that, that's where for me it was like, I want to do this because I'm kind of doing that already in certain aspects of my life. I was talking about this over breakfast, Ariana and I, as we get ready for the podcast here, and talking about different things, is, spirituality, being physically fit, being mentally well, and have a connection to your spiritual side, help you process trauma. It helps PTSD. It helps moral injury. It helps soul injuries, because you need to be, your body and mind need to be together, yin and yang. And then the spiritual aspect, it can be, it could be Christianity, it can be Buddhism, it can be
Right.
Taoism, it could be anything, but that's where, but it needs to be something. And it doesn't even have to have a name.
Yeah.
But that's part that what you mentioned is, all the number of veterans with incarcerated, different things. So, that you look at a veteran's life and say they're in the military for 4 years and they experience trauma, but now they're in prison. It's a pretty good chance that they're not just in prison because of what happened those 4 years.
Right.
There's a whole life they've lived during that time, and childhood trauma and different, addictive tendencies and those types of things all factor into that.
Right.
But them being a veteran will hopefully connect them to services that they best understand and connect with them.
Right.
But to process these things more thoroughly, I feel, and this is why I've gotten into yoga and why I want to share it, is because, and then it'll be my intention to share in this manner, is even if it's just a 1 hour class, you're through this physical movement, you're connecting your body and mind and spirit, even if it's just for 30 to 60 minutes, because I know that that's going to help. And you're going to walk out of that class feeling more connected to yourself. And that's a good thing. And that from there is the starting point. So then, from there, you more easily talk with others about what you processed. You more easily open your mind to different things that can help out. And so that's kind of why I've got more into it, and how I plan on using it more moving forward.
That's I see some similarities there, with some of the veterans. I talk about jujitsu and the martial arts.
Yeah.
It's much more than, hey, I learned how to take this guy down and, put him in an arm bar or whatever. I'm not a jujitsu guy here, but
neither am I.
but they talk about that, about surrounding themselves with people that have a positive outlook, that they come there, and I think the meditation side is, to me, that was the most interesting piece I read about yoga. It seems like it's almost more important than, not more important, but as beneficial as the physical activity side. So I've heard about it forever, and I always thought about, I'll be honest with you, it's not to be stereotypical or anything, but you always see on years ago, on TV, you would see the ladies yoga class or something like that.
Right.
And I think that perception on, too many times media creates a picture of what something is that, well, we know that. But anyways, I think what's key is the more I read about it, is the benefit to somebody like a veteran. Key things you said is it goes well beyond military service. Why certain things that are traumatic to us, and sometimes it's a build. You know what I mean? I had a tough childhood. I don't know how many veterans, guys and girls that I've been stationed with, left and went into military because their situation at home was horrible.
Right.
They had no opportunity.
Yeah.
And when we look at that, you're taking an individual who's already dealing with so many issues, and we say, we're going to put you into a situation where you're going to give you responsibility. And granted, they train us how to handle that. But over the years, and that's where I read this, that over the years, you start to see it build up, and then all of a sudden those certain, not tendencies, but symptoms start to show. And I think that's where different therapies, ways to deal with those when they appear. Yoga, to me, everything I read about, the combination of, this is an amateur guy talking about this, the combination of meditation and physical activity, it seems like common sense to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'll make I'll jump in a couple quick points to, so, we kind of walk around every day, just Joe civilian, whoever, veteran or not, and think about how stressed out the world is and all this bad stuff. There were 4,000 years ago, there were guys going up in the mountains and caves to escape the everyday life and stressors of everyday life.
Right.
They didn't go in, the world wasn't this peaceful, calm place.
Yeah.
It just turned bad 50 years ago or 100
years ago.
Right. It's human nature to feel these stressors. And so, it's just, we're just talking about yoga. We're talking about, that particular path, whatever, but all cultures. And this is what's interesting, that that I think that I look into. You look at the Viking culture, you look at the Native American culture, you look at some of the more warrior cultures throughout the South Pacific. There's this aspect of connecting mind and body through physical fitness or physical movement and breathing. That's a commonality that goes back thousands of years. So we're not special. This isn't anything new.
That's a good point.
We're repackaging it. And I think to your point, like when you talked earlier, the beginning about the SOCOM, or maybe you hit before we started recording, but you talked about some of the special forces people being trained on mindfulness and breath, and we see it in some police departments across the country. This meditation is, and I failed to mention this earlier, jumping around a bit. It's breathing. So meditation, all this comes down to you and I and everyone who's walking around this planet does every moment of every day, and that's breathe. Yeah. So meditation starts with just recognizing that you're breathing. And so when I teach what I do teach, and the things I have instructed group fitness in the past. I'm a personal trainer for a few years, and I've at different times and currently do now instruct meditation. And people think, like, oh man, I don't have an hour to sit there and stare at the wall or whatever. Just by sitting there and recognizing that you're breathing is meditating. Yeah. And that's where it starts. So then it becomes a practice, and how you turn it into, a part of who you are. It becomes a daily practice. And that's one thing I just wanted to stress is like this all comes, everything we're talking about just starts from breathing. So if you talked about I'm in this yoga teacher training, I'm the only guy. Most of the women who teach at this most of the people who teach at this studio, all the people who teach at the studio I'm getting my certification are white ladies in their 30s and 40s. And they all look the same, and they all wear the same leggings, and they're all wonderful human beings. I'm not saying that. I mean, they're super nice and kind. But what's exciting to the woman Autumn, who is doing my instructor, she's the owner, and I've been doing yoga for decades. Right. She's excited because I can share, by me sharing my practice, I can help more people like you and I. Yeah. We're like, might be intimidated to go into, bendy, flexy world. Right. And you don't have to be bendy. You can literally lay on the floor for an hour and do yoga. So, I mean, it's so. Oh, now you got my attention. There you go. So that's what it's all about. It's meeting people where you're at. And you and I know this, Tony, and doing the type of work we do, connecting veterans to the services, it's meeting them where they're at. And then going from there. So right. That's excellent point. I want to touch on one thing that you mentioned, and then what I would like to do as we close this out is give some veterans that if we pique their interests and family members, just how to go about finding yoga, how to how's it start out, things like that. But back to what you said about the military. I'm gonna put my glasses on so I can read here. It's actually in SOCOM's library. It's and I probably, hopefully I don't say his butcher's name too bad here, but Dr. Satbir Singh Kahalsa is he's actually out of Harvard Medical School. He does studies on yoga, and he just says yoga is one tool among others for increasing resilience and readiness for the U.S. military. And now SOCOM is getting into this, and there's an Army captain that says that yoga has been a tremendous source of strength for him. It's enabled him to obtain inner peace and control the memories which caused me anxiety for many years. Yoga is a tool for injury prevention, rehabilitation, and health promotion, and it needs to be championed because other soldiers deserve every chance to continue to serve and stay in the fight. And he goes on to talk about the captain in the Army said he was a complete skeptic of this. But what's interesting is you've got a command like US SOCOM, which is literally the tip of the spear when we go into the battle. And they're saying, look, this has value. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think it's so important to look at it. So many times, Lee, when we meet, veterans are in that broken stage. I know we've
connected on veterans, and so many things have happened to this stage. And man, if we could have just got to this person 6 years ago, 6 months ago, whatever it is, I think it's really important. So for the military that are on here, start dealing with your own mental, and don't take the word mental health as something's wrong with you, but your mental health. Just like you hit the gym and work out, you got to take care of your mental health. So yoga, I think, is everything I've seen. I've looked at it. I do read a lot that it needs more research. Like they haven't spent time to really research it. But so far, what's out there has been very positive. And I noticed the one thing I'd like to say. One of the Dr. Libby mentioned that it's a how did he say it? It's a complementary. There's a lot of therapies and situations out there you need to pursue, but this is very much. It's not going to hurt you. You know what I mean? This is really going to be a positive. So
that's the one point I put it just real quick to interject that. That's the point I wanted to make earlier. This isn't by no means a replacement of, working with a professional counselor, working with a professional psychologist for more specific trauma processing. This is a tool towards that. So I'm glad we made that point on here.
Yeah, and that's in one more thing, and then we'll talk about specifically how to find yoga and get into this. But to the veterans, the active military, that are they're we live in a world where we're worried about our teammate. We're worried about our brother, our sister that serves beside us. I hear so many veterans say when we're, let's say, a combat, some in a combat situation or a potential, that's a huge stressor, a potential. Nothing happened. There's just a potential. The number one thing that keeps them fighting, that makes them put their life on the line, is for the person that's beside them. And that, to me, if we veterans take that perspective, do whatever you can to save your brother or sister's life. Something simple as yoga, some of these other things that have helped you, have helped the many veterans. Lee is helping with this. This is really good stuff. So Lee, if a veteran says, okay, this piques my interest, I have no idea where to find yoga, how to go about it. What would they do? How would they get into this?
Well, I like to challenge people. And so first and foremost, it's coming out of your comfort zone. Zone. I mean, every town in the country has a yoga studio. And yoga's been around a very long time. And there are multiple schools. There's even in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, there's a black yoga that uses dark lights and more mellow, heavy metal music.
Oh yeah.
So it's just literally something for everyone. There's yoga where you hang from tapestry and like parachutes, and you lay there like in a hammock, and that's yoga. So there's everything. And then there's the super intense 90-minute hot yoga, 104 degrees. And so it's just a matter of, I think, first and foremost, coming out of your comfort zone. And that's part of the process. You can't just have everything hand delivered to you. You got to say, if I'm interested, I got to check this out. So that's one thing. That's for me, that was my personality. I was okay with that. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go check this out. I'm going to go check this gym out.
Yeah. Right.
And I'll speak specifically to men. When men walk into a yoga studio, people love it because it doesn't happen very often. So the normal kind of, everyday Joes who are just walking off the street and say, want to try it out. Yogis, people who teach yoga, love that. That's exactly why we're doing to have that first timer come in and be like, yeah, awesome, you're here. Everyone else has already been here. We know what we're doing. We'll be okay. We're all here to support you because this is what sharing your practice is all about. So anyone listening, you're going to be super welcomed when you walk in. And if you're not, that's not the studio for you.
Yeah.
And then try another thing. Yeah. So, point number one is just coming out of your comfort zone and trying it. If you want to go more specific to veterans, you mentioned the Yoga Veteran Project. You can go to their website and see a list of people like myself who as part of my plan, is provide veteran-specific yoga to the community, either free or $5, something cheap.
Right.
And so that you can kind of find a list of yoga not certified yoga teachers who focus on the veterans community.
Yeah, they had a pretty good list on their website, throughout many states. Yeah.
And similar to them is called Warriors at Ease.
I read that. That's a good site. Good site.
Yeah, it's a fantastic site. So when I'm complete my certification this summer, I'm taking a Warriors Ease level 1. So people will be able to go find me on, Warriors at Ease.
Oh, okay, cool.
The local VAs, I know in Pittsburgh here, there's Tai Chi, there's yoga for people with don't have great mobility. Butler VA, a friend of mine teaches, I believe, a weekly yoga class. He's Warrior at Ease certified. So it's just a matter of kind of put a little legwork in and then put a pair of shorts on or not, whatever. You talk about the most easiest way to approach a thing. You just show up, and if you can't move, then just sit there. That's what the training is for. Is a lot of the training you do in these 200 hours is modifications. So how to do each pose as it is supposed to be done. That's for the teacher,
right?
The person coming. The teacher is trained to modify every pose to whoever walks in the door. And if we're both stuck, then be like, all right, just have a seat. We'll figure it. Just start breathing. Cool, We'll figure it from there. So that I just kind of dispel some worry about what we would like walking in there the first time. It's something locally. So Team Red, White, and Blue. That was my foray into the veteran space. They do different programs. And their mission is through welcoming veterans back in the community through physical and social activities. Veterans Leadership Program locally. Sean Buzzard has his wellness program. Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, good dude.
Bringing lots of great services like that to the area. So it's just a matter of if go yoga for veterans, Google it.
Right.
You're going to come up with a dozen places to go try, and then you can always put my in the podcast too. You can put all my contact information in here.
Okay, cool.
And I will be glad to direct it if someone's interested in becoming an instructor. I spent about a year and a half figuring out how I wanted to become an instructor, and I've talked to a couple other people about that since, because it's super confusing. There's Hatha yoga. There's about 8 different schools.
I read that. Yeah.
And then a whole bunch after that. So it can be a little intimidating, but there's something for everybody for sure.
Yeah. No, it's some good points. I didn't realize, like with Team Red, White, and Blue, we do a lot with them.
Yeah.
Good organization. And there's tons of them like that. I'll make sure and put these website links on there. I'm glad you brought up Warrior at Ease. Yeah. I actually, as I was doing some of my reading and research on this before, I ended up there, and they had a great area with links on research that's been done on it. So, if people are skeptical to say, I think somebody just wants my $5 a month or whatever. Right. I encourage you, go in there, read about some of the legitimate research that's been done on this. And if that's your comfort level. So the $1 million question is I know most veterans, the biggest thing they're going to be concerned about, and they're going to ask is, does everybody have to wear yoga pants?
No, I do not wear yoga pants. Thankfully. Just shorts and a t-shirt is perfectly fine. And that's okay. And they all have stuff there, even during post-COVID or mid-COVID.
Right.
There's mats. Every yoga studio has mats they can use, blocks, straps.
Yeah.
I mean, everything they need just to show up and try it out. So unless you want to wear yoga pants, but some people shouldn't, to put it that way.
Well, that's what
I'm one of them.
I think about a couple of my buddies. I've seen them like 10 years after the military. I can't imagine them. No, good stuff, Lee. I appreciate you coming on. I mean, I think for the veterans, family members, look back what we said at the beginning. Family members, that just ask a question. Vet centers, guys like Lee, OVN, there's lots of resources. Reach out, ask a question. If there's a very concern about a family member or friend, Veterans Crisis Line is there. We'll pop the number up at the end of this. Don't feel afraid to call the number, dial option 1, and just say, I have a concern. it's okay. They're there to help you. We always want to reiterate our partners at the VA and the suicide prevention. They do an excellent job, and that's what they're there for. Good stuff. Like I said, I appreciate you being on. What I'd like to do is, in as we learn these therapies, OVN, Lee, you, anybody else out there, we're happy to help sponsor a veteran through first 6 months of yoga. If cost is a concern, let us know. We want to help.
That's great. Yeah.
That's something we definitely want to do. Yeah. Well, that's our goal, is to do much more than just be a big, a talking mode, is how can we do what you said it earlier, Lee? We're about going to the veterans where they're at. And we know if it's a financial situation, we don't have, tons of money, but we use our resources 100% to get the veterans there. So really appreciate what you do, buddy. Thank you for coming on. Good luck with everything. We'll be calling you. Yep. Yeah. New kid and wedding. You got all kind of stuff going on. So you should better be meditating a lot. So
I need to stay calm through all this.
Yeah. There you go. All right. Cool.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks
very
again,
much,
mate.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.